And I'm going to pull this up. And welcome, everybody. Welcome to the MC3 Change Agent meeting for February. My name is Amy Mabius, and I am the Best Practice Coordinator at Community Access to Recovery Services. And you may recognize me from MC3, BCT, NIATEX. I feel like I'm all over the place, but I want to talk to you today about our theme for 2024, which is the ripple effect. This year, we will focus on how to keep ourselves inspired, motivated, and passionate about the work we do to encourage a ricochet effect that spreads throughout our behavioral health system. We usually spend our time focusing on 9 great values, learning about what it means to be co-occurring, and the importance of continuous quality improvement. We don't spend a lot of time talking about how we individually make a difference. We have an exciting year ahead of us, creating our own ripple effect as change agents. I do have a couple of things I want to bring to your attention. First of all, next Tuesday, we have a training called Bridging the Generational Gap in the Workplace training. There's a morning session that's for everyone and an afternoon session that's for supervisors. We've had some cancellations, so there are some openings that are left. And so this is a training about how there are so many different generations right now in our workplace. And it's about how do we work together when there are different characteristics to each one of these generations. And so if you are interested, the best way to get a seat right now is actually to let me know. And so what I'll do is I'll put my name in the chat, my email. So if you are interested in that, or if you want more information about that, I can send it to you. So after I get done with this, I'll go ahead and plunk my information right into the chat. This time, I'm going to do something that I've never ever done before. I'm going to tell you the theme, what I think is going to be the theme, unless something else happens. I hope not. But I'm gonna tell you the theme for next year. I've never done that before. And so the theme for next year is Chef's Choice, which means that the change agents are going to be able to choose what they want to have at change agent meetings. If this is your time really to add your input, to maybe ask for something that you had always hoped that MC3 would cover and we just haven't. And so you may have recognized when you came into the registration process that there is a spot for you to put your information about that, maybe a topic that you're interested in, or a speaker that you saw that was extremely inspirational for you. So please make sure to fill that out so that next year is dedicated for something that you may have brought to the table for the MC3 change agents. So our theme, the ripple effect, leads us to our speaker today, Mark Sanders. Mark has been with us many times, creating numerous ripples throughout the years as he has presented his inspirational material to our MC3 change agents. I believe we are well over 10 years now, and it's always an honor to have Mark here. Mark is an international speaker whose presentations have reached thousands throughout the United States. He is the author of 5 books on recovery and has had a 30-year career as a university educator. Mark, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Father Joseph Martin was the first priest who ever got into recovery through Alcoholics Anonymous. And when Father Martin died, I called this dais, and I asked this dais to nominate him to sainthood. I'm not even Catholic, but here's what I was thinking. I had an ulterior motive. You see, he made a tape series on recovery, right? And there were people that would watch his videos and get into recovery like that. I learned that in order to be considered for sainthood in the Catholic Church, you have to perform 2 miracles. So here's my ulterior motive. If he becomes a saint, that means that recovery would be a miracle. And if recovery is a miracle, then you change agents are miracle workers. Thank you so much for all that you do. Know that I know that the world cannot compensate you enough for the important work that you do. This is Black History Month, Usually during this month, people tell stories about Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and Frederick Douglass. Today, I want to talk about a man by the name of Donald Goines. Have you ever heard of Donald Goines? When Donald Goines was 16 years old, he forged his birth certificate and made himself 18 years old on paper so he could go to the Vietnam War. And he came back from the Vietnam War suffering from PTSD. And how did he treat his PTSD? With heroin. You know, most people who use heroin at night, they always want to have two hits. One to get high at night, and what's the second one for? To avoid withdrawal in the morning. So Donald Goines was living in Detroit, Michigan, and he was withdrawing from heroin. And so he became a hustler and a book writer. He wrote 12 New York Times best-selling books during his active addiction. He was just writing to make money to avoid withdrawal from heroin, right? And we learned that all the characters in this book were people who he met in Detroit while he was hustling. Pool sharks, pimps, people engaged in prostitution, gang leaders, gangsters, drug selling. 12 New York Times best-selling books. I share that story just to remind you that the clients that we work with that have genius, even in active addiction, that genius is still there. I share with some of you all the fact that my father died smoking crack cocaine May 29, 1986. A decade later, my youngest brother called. He said, I have a drug problem. I said, I know. He said, I need help. I said, I know. So I put my brother in detox for 3 days. He called me on the third day and said, I'm bored. Now what do I do? I said, go to a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. And my brother attended his first NA meeting. And after the meeting, he called me in tears. He was crying. I said, why are you crying? He says, after the speaker spoke at the meeting, I looked at the speaker and I said, you spoke the truth. I was there. I remember you. The speaker was a man who used to use drugs and sell drugs with my father when my brother was a little boy. You spoke the truth. I was there. I remember you. The NA speaker went up to my brother and said, you don't know this, but as soon as your dad died, smoking cocaine, I got into recovery. There's a famous saying that some people die so other people can live. He said to my brother, and you certainly don't know this. When I was out there selling drugs with your dad, he saved my life twice. He said, so I often ask God, why did you save me? Looked at my brother and said, maybe one of the reasons that God saved me is so that I can help you. And he was talking about purpose in recovery. So about 14 years later, I'm at an airport in Utah. And I called my brother. I said, do you hear that Michael Jackson just died? My brother hung up. I have to go. As soon as I told him Michael Jackson died, he hung up the phone. And at that time, my brother was living in Gary, Indiana, the birthplace of the Jackson 5. So he rented out the house directly across the street from the house where Michael Jackson grew up in. He knew that people would come from all over the world to Gary, Indiana to visit the birthplace of Michael Jackson. So when they arrived from China and Japan and Germany, they wanted to go in the house, but there were people living in there. And my brother gave them a tour of the house that he rented out directly across the street, which was a replica of the house that the Jacksons grew up in. And he was selling the people from all over the world Michael Jackson t-shirts. He made so much money selling t-shirts that he wound up opening 3 businesses and became a millionaire in recovery. I said, man, how'd you know to do that? He said, because when I was actively using drugs, I was a hustler. And now that I'm in recovery, I'm still a hustler. It's a legitimate hustle now. Again, thank you for all that you do. Our presentation today is entitled Achieving Individual, Organizational, and Team Health to promote co-occurring disorders recovery. But first, I'd like to share with you some good news. Are you sitting down? Because this is some really good news. Okay, here we go. Research says that 75% of individuals with addictions will eventually achieve recovery. I'm going to pause for a moment just to let that sink in. That 75% of individuals with addictions will eventually achieve recovery. And some of you are thinking, yeah, I'm a case manager. I'm a recovery coach. I'm a therapist. If that's true, then why do my clients relapse over and over and over again? But the research I'm talking about are not the 1-year study or the 2 years you've been providing case management services with one client. I'm talking about 50-year studies by Valiant. Let's run the road. You might remember baseball player Darryl Strawberry. In the 1980s, he played for a team known as the New York Mets. And he would routinely miss Mets games and go into Bronx and smoke cocaine. He's now in long-term recovery. And some of you remember actor Robert Downey Jr. In the 90s, he was the poster child for active drug addiction. He was incarcerated for his drug-related crimes. He's now in long-term recovery, an award-winning actor. And the number of you who've been around for a few 24 hours remember singer Elton John. In the 70s and 80s, he was the poster child for active addiction. This year, Sir Elton John celebrates 34 years of recovery. And one of his acts in recovery was to reach out to a rapper who lived in Detroit, Michigan, a street called 8 Mile. He reached out to Eminem. He says, I want to help you get into recovery. And this year, rapper Eminem celebrates 12 years of recovery. And then there's the basketball player, Lamar Odom, who won championships with Kobe Bryant. You know Lamar Odom, married to the Kardashians, whom almost overdosed off of drugs. This year, he's in his 15th year of recovery, and he's opened 14 treatment centers for the treatment of addiction. Let me bring it closer to home. After my father died, smoking cocaine, my Uncle Isaac entered recovery, a treatment that is. And he was the first person in our family, was my Uncle Isaac, to get into treatment. And we now count at least 30 members of our family who are now in recovery. And one of my Uncle Isaac's first tasks in recovery was to reach out to my cousin Yvette, his daughter, to try to encourage her to go back to school. So we went to his daughter, my cousin Yvette, and said, listen, you were the smartest little girl in the world. The only problem you had was that it was hard to focus because you had a daddy that was using heroin and a mother that was using heroin. Would you go back to school? He met with her in the projects. In Chicago, we call public housing the projects. And I brought for you a picture.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
This is Amy speaking. I think that your slides are not progressing forward. We're still on the first slide.
Oh, that's too bad. So what should we do if we're still on the first slide?
So I think what's happening, so from I don't know if other people can see this too, but from our end, what I can see is that you're still on
Okay.
the editing
Let me
mode.
ask you this.
Okay,
Let
yeah.
me ask you this. Is everyone okay if I come out of this, send you the slides and you can advance my slides?
Sure, I can absolutely
Get
do
a
that.
thumbs up from the people and I'll take a moment to do that and I'll come right back. Okay, but they can hear me though, right?
You're getting a million thumbs up. Yes,
Okay, so
feel free to go
out,
ahead and send it to me and I'll advance them for you.
I'm gonna come out of all of this and then I'm gonna come back.
I just want to make sure that So, okay, so there's something that you just did, Mark. You just whatever you pressed just right now, advance the slide. So what you
But I'm
did,
not in that mode, so I'd rather you advance. So they gave me the
sure,
thumbs up. I'm going to come back in.
that's
Ask them
fine.
to take a moment of silent contemplation to think about all the clients they've served that are doing well.
That's a good thing to think about. I'll grab Mark's slides and then I'll advance them forward for him. I did see that some people reached out to me about the Bridging the Generational Gap training. I'll be sure to I'll get back to you today. There was another question in the chat too. Was the slide changing on your end or just the one time? Okay, good. Okay, so I thought, oh no, am I the only one that was noticing that the slides weren't changing? The one time. Okay, thank you. So I'll go in and see if he sent me those. Somebody wrote the ripple effect of technology. So true. Pam, is that you? We'll just be patient. This is a good time if you have to get a snack or step away from your computer for a moment, because it will take me just a moment to go ahead and load up those slides. We're just taking our break early.
Well, it's great to see everyone.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
And 177 change agents here.
Yes.
You know, that is awesome. Particularly after the thunderstorm last night. And then the snow. And then I think we changed 5 different weather systems like in one day. And that's the ripple effect of something. I'm not sure what.
So it looks like he sent them to me.
Climate change, maybe? Ripple effect from climate change.
Could be. What happened to Mark? What happened to Mark though?
He'll come back.
Okay.
You know, can I just say that before this would
Yeah, I
have.
am
Hi,
back.
Mark.
Where's
Okay, I
Mark?
did get your
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, so I'm back.
yeah,
Thank
you're
you all.
good. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen. And just let me know when you're ready to advance the slide. Let's see if
Okay,
this
all right.
works. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Now, is this
Absolutely.
advancing?
Yes.
So let's go back. Let's go back to that other slide before that one. Right there. Thank you so much. So I was talking with you all about my uncle who went into public housing and projects to talk to his daughter into going back to school. And Amy, if we can go to the next slide. That's his daughter, my cousin Yvette. She's wearing a special cap and gown. She received a PhD that day. She's the only doctor in our family, right? And Amy, we'll go to the next slide. And after she got that PhD, she wrote a book called Going from the Project from Public Housing to a PhD. And we'll go to the next slide. I ask you all to lean in and notice the physical resemblance between the young man that's in front of my cousin Yvette and my cousin Yvette. The same head tilt, the same dimples, the same smile. That's her son. And he got a college degree that day and graduated from the same university where his mother's on the faculty with a PhD. May not look like it, but recovery is possible and happening every day. And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. All right, so are you all still sitting down? Because before we get into our content, I have more good news to share. Long-term studies indicate that 1/3 of people with severe mental illness will eventually remit. They will make so much progress that you'd never know they had severe mental illness. As a matter of fact, they did some studies out of Philadelphia that said that by the time people who have schizophrenia turn 65 years old, if they're living in a community with other 65-year-olds, you can't always tell who at one time or another was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I remember as if it were yesterday. I was all of 23 years old and a graduate student on an inpatient mental health facility. And we'd have these community meetings, and we had one client that would say, "Don't talk in meeting. They're tape recording everything you say. They're going to use that tape against you. They're going to take you up to the 9th floor, perform a lobotomy on you if they don't like what you say. They're members of the FBI. They're not counselors." Me and this man, we live in the same neighborhood for over 4 decades. And I remember about 35 years ago, walking up to him and nobody was around. He said, "I was a student at the hospital when you were there." He says, "Oh yeah, I was very angry back then." So I've been watching him for 40 years. We go to the same grocery store. If you saw him today, you would never know that he had schizophrenia. He looks like a distinguished older gentleman. Long-term studies indicate that 1/3 of individuals who have mental illness will make some progress. 1/3 will remit completely. 1/3 makes some progress. And 1/3 remains about the same, or they get worse. So if what I'm saying is true, then why would we do this work? I'll respond to my own question. Because if you can help people initiate recovery earlier, you can cut down on years of suffering. In other words, I would rather a person initiate recovery at age 40 than 70, because maybe at age 70, she's had so much internal organ damage because of her addiction, she might die at 72. Secondly, you can cut down on years of family suffering through the work that you do. Third, you can save the county, the state, and the city a lot of money. Because once people get into recovery, they don't have as many medical hospitalizations, as many psychiatric hospitalizations, as many arrests, and prison periods of time in prison, right? So we can also, by doing this work, save our state a lot of money. But in order to do the best work we can do, we need to be at our best. So our time together, we're going to talk about how to be our best as individuals, how to be the best teammate in the world, and then how to achieve organizational greatness in order to help clients with their recovery. So let me just stop for a moment and ask you to put a yes or no in chat. Is that agenda okay for you today? Is that agenda all right? That'd be a good use of your time. Being your best, being the best teammate and helping us achieve organizational health. We see some thumbs there, Amy. And then secondly, just to know who I'm talking with, Can you put in chat, thank you for those thumbs up. Can you put in chat what you do? Are you a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker? What do you do? That'll help me to tailor this to your unique needs. And Amy, I will check in with you to find out what they do.
Mark,
Any
I
barbers?
cannot see the chat when I have this open. Can you see the chat?
Let me see. Just seeing some thumbs up. Yeah, I can see the chat.
Excellent.
So what do you do? I'm seeing some yeses there. I think I can see the chat. I'm seeing some yeses. So share with me in chat your occupation. What do you do?
Also, if we need to recruit a change agent to help with the chat too, we can do that.
That'd be good.
We have a lot of helpful change agents.
Who've been with us for a while too.
Yeah.
I see a lot of, oh, do you need someone to read them off or like
That'd
your
be
house?
nice. Thank you. Is that Abigail?
Yeah.
Thank you, Abigail.
Thank you,
I've seen
Abigail.
a lot of supervisors, care coordinators, therapists in trainings, case managers, IPS employment specialists, mental health professionals. I don't know what MHT is off the top of my head. Psychiatric crisis worker, performance and quality improvement care coordinator,
I'm
end of
seeing
life
business
doula.
development for Goodwill, case manager. So I can see them now. Somehow they're appearing. Thank you, Abigail.
Yeah, no
I
worries.
need a little bit more help. I'll reach out. Mental health counselor, David Zill. Michelle is a counselor. All right. And then we see someone without their name there. Jennifer B is a peer support specialist. Where would the world be? We got Kimberly, an executive director. So we have a nice range with us today. And we shall go to the next slide. Okay. So here's the premise of our time together. When we are at our best, clients thrive. There's a greater sense of continuity of care, more teamwork. Let me ask you a question. Let's chat about this. If your mother had mental illness or a substance use disorder, and you took her to a residential facility to get help, how long would it take you to know whether or not, lots of peers with us today, whether or not you wanted your mother to stay in that program? How long would it take for you to know? And how would you know whether or not you'd want to stay, have her stay there or leave? How long would it take for you to know if you want your mother to stay in that program? We see some school-based therapists here. Would it take you a long time to know if you wanted your mother to stay in that program or a short amount of time? You're curious. You know, usually when I ask that question, people say they would know, Pamela's an executive director, they would know right away based upon the feel, right? So when morale is high and energy is strong amongst the staff, then clients thrive in such an environment. And when morale is high, there's greater follow-through. People are more likely to engage in evidence-based practices, and as a result, clients will make greater progress. And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. Thank you so much. But when we are not at our best, client care suffers. Morale is low, higher staff turnover, and evidence-based practices is only mythology. Let me share with you what I mean. I'm going to lean forward in order to just be dramatic as I share this with you. Research indicates that it takes about 5 years to master an evidence-based practice. It takes 5 years to master an evidence-based practice. Annual counselor turnover is 1 year. If we are only staying at the agency that we work for 1 year, we are not really doing evidence-based practices. When we're not at our best, morale is low, high staff turnover, poor follow-through in terms of client care, and remaining staff begin to feel overwhelmed because they're picking up the load while the agency is hiring new people. More clients slip through the cracks. And as a result of us not being at our best, there's poor client outcomes. And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. So being your best, the first recommendation that you keep learning. Dr. Pat Love said, clients love it when you're smart. In order to keep learning, we keep growing. You know, Abraham Maslow, the humanistic psychiatrist, said that clients make more progress when working with helpers who strive for self-actualization in our personal life. So if you strive to be the best you can be, automatically the clients that you serve will make more progress. How many of you, by show of hands, have birthdays? Would you raise your hand if you have a birthday? That's my way of making sure everybody's still listening at 1:33 in the afternoon after lunch. Well, you know, the Aborigines in Australia, I read about some tribes that don't celebrate their birthday. They believe, if anything, you should throw a birthday party for your parents on your birthday. After all, they brought you into the world. And instead of celebrating their birthday, members of these tribes celebrate what I'm calling the self-actualization day. That each member of the tribe sets out to be more self-actualized this year than they were last year. They're working on growing, right? And once they achieve greater growth, they call the whole tribe, I'm better now, let's have my party. So how do we grow? Amy, we shall go to the next slide. I invite you to join me in this. Every year, every January, I set goals. I call it a whole person goal setting. Think about it. As human beings, we're mental beings, we're emotional beings, we're social beings, we're physical beings, and we're spiritual beings. If we grow in all of those areas, our clients that we serve will vicariously make more progress because of your growth. Oh, I'm happy to report. And some of you who've known me for a while, you're looking at me on the screen. You could probably tell that I've cut my weight in half.
Yep.
Yep. In 2000, I weighed 350 pounds. Now I weigh 180 pounds. Because for the last 4 years, I've been working on more physical health and physical growth, right? So what are your goals? To become smarter this year than you were last year? To make sure that you express your emotions? To make sure that we have strong friendships? Do you know that the research says that when women don't have contact with female friends, that they can get physically sick? Thank you, Pamela. And that when men don't have contact with male friends, that can do as much damage to our health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day and drinking a pint of wine per day, right? So as we grow in all of these areas, again, Maslow said, your clients will grow too. You'll feel more hopeful to them, and they'll pick up on that hope. Maybe we shall go to the next slide.
Change agents, make sure you're on mute, please.
We're talking about being your best. Work on your heart and resentments and other varieties of unfinished business. Incredible story about this priest by the name of Father Eddie O'Brien. Father O'Brien was up at 3 o'clock on a Saturday night writing a Sunday morning sermon. There was a knock on the door. Father, there's a man in the hospital who's sick. He's dying. He says he wants to see a priest before he dies. So Father O'Brien made it to the hospital. The nurse says, good luck. He's belligerent. He's an alcoholic. He cursed out the whole medical staff. Good luck. Father O'Brien walked in the man's room. What do you want? He said, you wanted to see a priest. Sit down, start telling his story. He lost 3 wives because of his drinking. He lost 5 jobs because of his drinking. Father O'Brien asked him, is there something you'd like to tell a priest before you die? He said, yeah, I love to tell you, but I know when I die, I'm going to go to hell and God will never forgive me. So eventually he shared his story. He was 18 years old. He had a job working on the railroad. This was a simple job. All he had to do was every time a train came through was to push a button so a gate could close, so no cars could come through while the train was coming through. One day when he was 18 years old, he was so drunk he forgot to push the button. And the train came through and the car came through at the same time. And the train hit the car, killing a husband and wife and their 2 young daughters. Father O'Brien said, I've forgiven you so I know God will. That was my father, my mother, and my 2 older sisters. You know, we send people to outer space. One of the hardest things to do is to forgive others. The resentments that we hold in our heart, according to Jacqueline Small, can block our ability to be as therapeutic as we can be. You know what Dale Carnegie said? He said dogs, their whole purpose in life is to be loving. They don't hold resentments. They have a lot of empathy. You know, writer Mark Twain told the story. When his daughter died, her dog broke his leash and ran all the way to the funeral home and jumped on top of her casket to show his respect. Dogs don't hold resentments. They're all love. They're all heart. You know, when Bill Gates was asked, of everyone in the world that you admire, who do you admire most? Who do you admire most? And Bill Gates said, Nelson Mandela. He said, you see, I'm trying to master technology, but Nelson Mandela mastered the heart. He was in prison for 27 years. And when he got out, he wasn't bitter in his heart. Client engagement, recovery coaches, case managers, therapists, it's not heady stuff. It's about connecting with the human heart. And Amy, we'll go to the next slide. We're talking about being at our best. We want to guard against burnout and compassion fatigue in order to be built to last. By show of hands, how many of you have ever experienced burnout? Some of you are saying, I'm so burned out, I can barely raise my hand. Burnout is caused by exhaustion and chronic stress and toxic organizational dynamics. Years ago, I gave a speech in Toledo, Ohio. If you were standing next to me at this speech and looked at the people in the audience, you would have thought that somebody had just died. They looked so depressed, so down. It took me a few minutes into the presentation to realize that this was the most chronically burned out group of workers I'd ever seen in my life. Problem was, the program had only been open for 6 months. How can a program be open for just 6 months and the entire staff is burned out? How could that be? Oh, I know what you're thinking. Large caseloads, too many clients, right? That's not the answer. It was a brand new program built from the ground up, a juvenile detention center. And before they admitted the juveniles, the inspectors came in. The water inspectors, the fire inspectors came in and found out that the building was in violation of water and fire codes, but they could admit no juveniles because they had fire violations, fire code violations. But because they were all hired, they went to work every day, first, second, and third shift. They had no clients to work with, but they were all burned out. How could that be? That'd be like a school with no students, a church with no congregation members, a hospital with no patients. How could they all be burned out with no clients? It turns out what my grandmother used to say was absolutely correct. My grandmother used to say that an idle mind is the devil's workshop. You ever heard that before? An idle mind is the devil's workshop? So with no clients to work with, they spend all of their time talking about each other. One woman said, Mark, around here, we always walk in threes. I said, why? She said, because if ever you see two people walking side by side, if you see two people walking side by side, you know they're talking about a third person. Gossip gets you tired. And I didn't realize that, so I quickly made it back to Chicago, and I started gossiping. And once I discovered that gossip gets you tired, I called my brother and I said, man, did you know that gossip gets you tired? And we made a pledge that we wouldn't gossip for 6 months. In fact, he pulled out his Bible. We sealed the deal with prayer. He quoted the following scripture from the Bible. You criticize your neighbor for having a splinter in his eye. Meanwhile, you have a whole tree in your eye. Instead of criticizing your neighbor for having a splinter in his eye, take the log out of your own eye. Then help your neighbor take the splinter out of his eye. We agreed, no gossip 6 months. He called me 6 days later and said, man, I haven't talked bad about anybody in 6 days. I'm shaking like a leaf. He said he was going through withdrawal like somebody who drinks 5 pints a day, right? Gossip is a drug. Nothing destroys the fiber of an organization like gossip. When I mention toxic organizational dynamics, they're usually strong in gossip. It gets you tired, right? Burnout is caused by exhaustion, chronic stress, and gossip. Compassion fatigue, which also goes by the name of secondary trauma, secondary PTSD, is caused by your absorbing the client's traumatic experiences. All the horrible things they share with you, you incorporate them within your being. You become vulnerable to compassion fatigue. One of its signs, like burnout, is exhaustion and feeling ineffective in your work. So let's take a moment, if you would, and define success in this work. Feel free to put your response in chat or to unmute yourself. Here's the question. It's on the PowerPoint. In your work with clients with co-occurring disorders, how do you define success? Would you either put your response in chat or unmute yourself? What's success for you? What I've learned over the years, to be at your best, you don't have to be successful. You have to feel successful long enough for 75% of your clients to eventually achieve recovery, to making steps in the right direction, as Leah said. And Lisa says, helping others find authenticity and help. You know, just Leah, if I'm authentic, I can help my clients sharing a smile. How about that? Someone simply said, sharing a smile. Credible story about a man who was going to commit suicide by jumping into the Golden Gate, off the Golden Gate Bridge, and said he wouldn't jump if one person smiled at him on the way. When clients reach their goals, when clients show up, someone said. When help a client feel a little better after they've left a session. Someone that is stable and at peace. Let me let you in on a secret. What I've learned in my 42 years of doing this work, and Christian says when clients feel heard and supported, hey, like a smile, Christian, you can achieve that 100% of the time. When you can help clients, Ladonna says, manage their symptoms. What I've learned in my 42 years is that the more my definition of success is based on what someone else does, like if my clients, 10 of my clients get their GED, or 20 of my clients stop getting high, if my definition of success is based upon what someone else does or doesn't do, then I don't have that much control over my definition of success. When clients feel confident in their choices. You see, I used to be the person that wanted to save the world, right? And I had magical thinking. If I could help all of my clients get sober, better yet, if I could help the whole city of Milwaukee get sober, the whole city, maybe my grandfather would stop drinking Seagram 7, and my dad would stop smoking crack. When my dad went from selling marijuana to selling crack, I knew he was over his head. Because he sold marijuana by the brick, by the pound. It came in size 12 shoeboxes. One day I was over his house and he fell asleep and he burned some cocaine up underneath an infrared light. It was about this much cocaine. He said that was $1,500. I knew he was over his head. So a month later, I said, Dad, I wish you didn't use drugs. I loved you then, I love you now. He said, okay, son, I'll stop. And 2 months later, he was found dead in the closet at work having smoked crack cocaine. When my dad died smoking crack cocaine, I was an MSW and a certified addictions counselor. I've given presentations on addictions recovery all over the country. I memorized the 12 steps frontwards, sideways, and backwards when my dad died, especially the first one. We admitted we were powerless over our addiction, and it made our life unmanageable. My friends, I never knew what that word powerless meant until after my dad died. You know what it means? That you can do the best job in the world at helping someone recover, and you have no power whatsoever as to whether or not they recover. When my dad died, I was free because my job shifted. My job was no longer to transform your life. My job was to be the best counselor I can be. And I've learned if my success is defined by what I do, I have some control over that success. And guess what I learned? If you're the best you can be, the clients you serve will make a lot of progress. 75% will eventually enter recovery. You just won't be there to see the miracle. And then we shall go to the next slide. So they've done some research on burnout. Check this out. The research says that newer workers experience more burnout than more experienced workers because they don't know their limits yet. Believe it or not, workers with kids experience less burnout than workers without kids. Do you know why? It's 2 reasons why. Number one, kids remind us of the importance of play. You know, they say being a grandparent is better than being a parent. They remind you of the importance of play. And our work is so serious, we need to be reminded to play. And number two, raising kids is stressful. So they give you a lot of practice of dealing with stress. The next study found that workers that have significant interpersonal relationships, you know, healthy friendships outside of work. I always believe that every counselor, every case manager should have at least one friend who's a lumberjack. So when you get together, you don't talk about cases. All you talk about is wood. Research says that workers who can acknowledge personal limits experience less burnout than those who can't. And maybe we shall go to the next slide. Workers with rescue fantasies. You know, I want to save all of Milwaukee Avenue, all of Wisconsin Avenue. Wisconsin Avenue is long. I want to save the world. Experience more burnout. Stretch superstars. You see, about two of you all are the Giannis and the Jordan of this work. So you're in demand, but that can burn you out. Research says that many professionals will experience burnout 3 or 4 times over the course of their career, and they will recover from it, and they will learn from it. And maybe we shall go to the next slide. Let's take a moment and talk about compassion fatigue, secondary trauma, secondary PTSD. Working with traumatized kids increases the risk of compassion fatigue. Workers with personal trauma histories are at an increased risk of compassion fatigue, especially if the client's trauma is similar to your trauma. If you have a large caseload, you're vulnerable to compassion fatigue. It starts to feel after a while like an assembly line. Next, take a number, next. Listening to lots of traumatic stories without a relationship with the clients you serve puts you at risk of compassion fatigue. That's why intake workers, for the executive directors that are with us today, know that receptionists are at the highest rate of compassion fatigue. Have you hugged a receptionist today? You know why? Because everybody that walks through that door is a part of the receptionist caseload. They're seeing all these people without a relationship, answering all these phone calls without a relationship. Next on the list, vulnerable to compassion fatigue, are intake specialists. Because they're hearing all of these traumatic stories, one after another after another. So here's what I want to suggest you do. If you're working in a program with intake specialists and all they do are intakes, I encourage you to encourage them to allow them to work with at least 2 clients long term. So they're not just dealing with like one after another next, but they're able to build some long-term relationships. Case managers are next, and recovery coaches in terms of experiencing compassion fatigue. Because your clients are dealing with so many crises that you go from crisis to crisis to crisis. Unlike the therapist who can say, I'm closing my door right now. And then dealing with death and dying increases the risk of compassion fatigue. Like I imagine that you all experienced a lot of losses, right? During COVID-19. That increases the risk of compassion fatigue. And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. If you are strong in emotional empathy, you're at risk for secondary trauma. Here's what I mean. Some of you have cognitive empathy. You can feel clients' pain. Some of you are so emotionally empathetic that everything your clients go through, you go through. You feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster. Years ago, we had a student. We taught her everything I learned in graduate school in 10 minutes. I taught her my old graduate education in 10 minutes. I said, go in there and meet with the client and nod your head like this and say, I see, tell me more. She was ready. I gave her a $40,000 education in 10 minutes. So she met with her first client. And he says, I'm hearing voices. And she said, and what are the voices telling you? He said, the voices are telling me to imagine you with no clothes on. She got up, ran out of the room, she started crying. From that moment on, she cried all day. She'd be in the corner crying. Say, how come you're crying? She said, that client is homeless. I feel like I'm homeless. She'd cry. His girlfriend left him. I feel like somebody left me. She'd cry. He had to stand in public aid office for 8 hours and she'd cry. She stayed in our profession for 1 month. She switched careers. What do you think her career was when she left our profession? I'm curious what you think she switched to. You can put that response in chat. What did she become when she decided she wasn't going to be a counselor because she felt too much of the client's pain? What do you think she became? Latoya said a rehab specialist. A construction worker. That might have done it for her. That makes a lot of sense. A teacher. You know what she did? I ran into her. She worked in a flower shop. She said people were just too difficult to deal with. But here's what she shared with me, the gift she gave me. So Mark, you ever notice that when the clients would come in the staff's office with requests, the staff wouldn't hold eye contact with the clients? Yeah, we'd hold eye. No, you wouldn't hold eye contact with the clients, especially the clients that were the most needy. The fellow supervisors. I sat in the counseling office for about 2 weeks. And sure enough, clients would walk in with needs, and the staff would grant those needs with no eye contact. I figured it out. Compassion fatigue set in, and they stopped holding eye contact with their clients. There's good news. If you can take the time to meditate and get centered and engage in mindfulness practices, right? That's excellent recovery from compassion fatigue. If you use evidence-based practices, the ones that get results, you feel like you're making more progress in your work. That's a burnout and compassion fatigue. And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. Workers experiencing burnout and compassion fatigue are often can benefit from creating greater life balance. We need balance. Amy, we should go to the next slide. You know what Mark Twain said? Mark Twain said, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you should do is eat a live frog. And he said, and the rest of your day is guaranteed to be better than that, because that's the most disgusting thing you'll do all day. You know what that live frog represents? Are all the things that we procrastinate on at work, like paperwork. How many of you, by show of hands, are behind in your paperwork? I still have some progress notes to get caught up on since 1989. But what we do when we procrastinate, we start doing things like paperwork, right? During our weekends. And we never get balance. We never get a chance to replenish ourselves. So here's the story. One day, I was downtown Chicago doing a bunch of paperwork. And I jumped in a cab to make it back home to do more paperwork. Now, if you'd ask me what's most important to me, without blinking, I would tell you my kids are more important to me. More important than just about anything else. Yet I can't tell you how many times I jumped in I walked into my home and looked at my computer to see if you sent me an email, or looked at my phone to see if you called me, or if you sent me a text. So I jumped in this cab to make it home to do more paperwork. And the cab driver looked at me through a rearview mirror. And he said, "Can I tell you a story?" I said, "Sure." He said, "One day a man got in my cab and said, 'Roll the windows up, turn the air conditioner on, turn the radio off. Take me to O'Hare Airport. I have a plane to catch.' 'Yes, sir.' The driver said, 'Sir, would you like for me to get in the express lane or the local lane?' 'Get in the express lane. I'm running late.' He said at one point, the passenger pulled out a $100 bill and said, 'Listen, I'm running late to the airport. I'm headed from Chicago to California. If you can get me to the airport on time, I'll give you a $100 tip. I know you have to speed to get me there on time.' The cab driver said, 'I can't afford any more speeding tickets.' They had an argument. As soon as they got close to the airport, he said there was a huge gush of black smoke in the air. The passenger said, 'Turn on the radio, let's hear what happened.' They turned on the radio, and what they heard was that there was an American Airlines flight that had just crashed out of the runway. The plane was headed from Chicago to California. He looked at his airline ticket, and he saw that that was the flight that he was supposed to be on. So he said in a low voice, "I want you to take this cab and turn it around and take me to Union train station." The cab driver said, "You're going to take a train to Chicago to California?" He said, "No, this put things in perspective for me. I'm taking a train from Chicago to Ohio. That's where my family is at. It's not about working all the time. It's about loving and spending time with people that you love. I don't know how he knew to tell me that story, but I can promise you this. When I went home, I didn't do any paperwork. I spent time with my children instead. And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. What I'm going to ask you to do is pull out a piece of paper and letter it A through D. A, B, C, D. You might find this kind of fascinating, the results of what I'm about to ask you to do. Would you take a piece of paper and just letter it A through D? What I'd like to ask you to do, A through D, is to write down the 4 things that are most important to you in the world. Would you write down the 4 things that are most important to you in the world? Take about 30 more seconds. These are the 4 things that are most important to you in the world. Now, what I invite you to do is to write yes or no to each of those 4 items, yes or no to this question. Which of them receive the time and attention from you that they deserve? Which of the 4 receive the time and attention from you that they deserve? For each one that gets the time and attention from you that they deserve, put a yes. For each one of them that does not get the time and attention from you that they deserve, would you put a no? So let's chat. Would you put in chat the number of yeses? So Johnny had 4. That's amazing, Johnny. Ruby says 1.5. And Tanya says 2. David 2. Yeah, you know what and Brooke says 4, but we'd love to figure out how you did that one, Brooke. Someone said 3. The average across the country is 2. Here's what we've discovered. Do you realize that you can save the whole city of Milwaukee and the surrounding suburbs, get everybody into recovery, and lose that which is most important to you, right? You know what I heard a millionaire say? I heard a millionaire say, actually, he was a billionaire. I read in the book, a billionaire said, you are successful if the people that you want to love you actually love you. You are successful if the people who you want to love you actually love you. And love is a verb. And some of us are so busy doing case management and clinical supervision that we never have time to get to that which is important. And we can be our best unless we can get to that which is most important. Scott Miller says, if your children think you suck, you suck. I don't care how great the world says you are. I know that's not technical language, but it made a lot of sense to me when he said that. And we shall go to the next slide. Thank you, Amy. So this is the time management grid. Speaks to how we spend our time. In the upper left-hand corner, Philip said 0. In the upper left-hand corner, these are activities that we engage in that are urgent and important. It includes things like client crises, client emergencies, deadlines, and dealing with suicidal clients. You know the client who calls you at 4:59 on a Friday afternoon, and they say to you, I'm thinking about ending it all, right? In the upper left-hand corner, this is case management work. This is recovery coaching work. It's both urgent and important. In the upper right-hand corner, these are activities that we engage in that are important but not urgent. I have in parentheses, most important. It includes your mission and your purpose, important relationships that you want to nurture. I have a friend of mine who coaches 3 high school sports. baseball, basketball, and football. He's so busy coaching, he's never taken his son or daughter to a game. The most important, long-range planning, that book. You're wondering what book? You know, almost everybody I know is writing a book. They're so busy they never get a chance to get to the book. Important but not urgent, most important. In the lower left-hand corner, these are activities that we engage in that are urgent but not important. It includes the crisis of other people. Some of these people we don't even like very much. Let me ask you a question by show of hands. Have you ever informally just counseled a friend informally? I have. I've informally counseled friends. That's not a big deal. You know, when we start getting in trouble, Johnny, we start getting in trouble when we start counseling friends. Some of them we don't even know. I heard you were a counselor. You know what these folks do? You see, some of you all have an invisible sign in the middle of your forehead that reads, I will help anybody at any time. Just call me, right? The world can see that sign and they'll call you, and they always call at the wrong time. You've been watching American Idol all season. They called you 1 second before the finale. Can we talk? I heard you were a good counselor. You've been watching The Bachelor all year. 1 minute before the finale. Can we talk? Some phone calls are a waste of time. Some meetings are a waste of time. Have you ever attended a meeting that was simply a waste of time? I used to work at agencies where we would have meetings after the meeting and have another meeting after that meeting. Some meetings are a waste of time, right? Some emails are a waste of time. You know the smartest thing I've ever done? I have 2 email addresses, one for you and one for my family. Because if I put your emails with theirs, I would never get to yours. My family send me these emails, these clever attachments. Download this, Mark is clever. I decided in the name of time, I would give every relative 2 chances to prove to me they know what a clever attachment is. If they can't prove it in the second email, I don't open theirs. And then I have these relatives. Yes, somebody said turn off your phone. I have these relatives that are so holy, they believe that it's a long distance call to you for God, but local call for them. They send me these incredibly long religious emails. One of my cousins sent me God's resume to download. Do you have any idea how long God's resume is? In the lower right-hand corner, these are activities that we engage in that are unimportant and not urgent. Time wasters, busyness, trivia, looking at ridiculous, silly TV, reading bad novels by bad writers, watching shows like Snooki from Jersey Shore has another baby and moves to Mississippi. You know, just silly stuff like that, right? But guess what we've learned over the course of our whole lifetime? The way most of us spend our time during the day is in the upper left-hand corner, dealing with one client crisis after another. Then we go from box number 1 to box number 3, letting other people waste our time. We go from box number 1 to box number 3 to box number 4. Now we're wasting our own time. Watching bad TV programs, falling asleep in front of the TV, only to wake up the next day to do the same thing all over again. But you know, over the course of a whole life, what gets left behind in all of this, in terms of how we manage our time, are the items in the upper right-hand corner, the things that are most important, like living our mission and our purpose, and nurturing relationships that are important to us, and long-range planning of our life. We shall go to the next page because let me ask you a question. And Amy, we'll go to the next slide. What if your life was led by your mission? I invite you to finish that stem in writing. You can put it on paper, but also feel free to put it in chat. We're about to do something really special right now, and I'm going to make it make sense in a few minutes. My mission in my community is, however you define community, what's your mission in your community? I'll give you mine. I speak to the teenagers in my community. I go out of my way because nobody speaks to them. You know what my wife told me? Because I speak to the teenagers, she always feels safe in the neighborhood. But she knows they'll have her back because her husband speaks to them. What's your mission in your community? I'm curious. Someone said to be a member of the community, a mentor. How about that? To young people, to make a difference. Leslie says to make a difference is their mission in their community. Brooke said to spread love, joy, and hope. How about that? Brooke, because you may be doing the same thing during the day and then doing the same thing in the evening. That Jessica's about healing in her community. How about that? And then someone says, always to try to be a cheerleader for other people. Me too. I'm always encouraging people. Always. Very good. And Latoya says to help my community understand the importance of nutrition and health. How about that? I just figured that out in the last 4 years, I promise you. Ruby says, my mission is to empower people to reach their goals and fulfill their life. Okay, very good. Now, let's go to the next slide. Would you finish this, Tim? My mission at home is you're working all day. What's your mission when you put the key in the door at home? You see, you've identified your mission in your community. What about when you make it at home? What's your mission? And Kimberly said to simply be present. Because sometimes when we make it home, we can be so distracted as a result of listening all day at work, to take care of family, make sure they feel loved and comfort. To cook and clean all day, boy, Latoya. How about that? Helping all day and then cooking and cleaning in the evening. David said to take care of himself. To be the best mom and wife I can be, LaDonna says. Relax and reset, Jessica says. Get ready for the next day to love and be loved. See, the way you're describing these things, right? They really challenge us to make children feel loved and accepted, right? What I loved about my grandmother is she took care of rich kids. She was a domestic worker. I promise you, she took care of her grandson as well as she took care of anybody. To be accepted and self-care, Johnny says. To make my pup happy, how about that? Somebody left millions of dollars to their dog. They said they got more love from their dog than everybody. To leave work and to love this, Ruby says. All right, we got one more here. Create a loving, peaceful environment. Okay, and we shall go to the next slide. To unconditionally love my husband. How about that? Every husband in the world can use that, unconditional love. Okay, so finish this then. My mission at work is, we're not talking about duties. We're talking about purpose. What's your purpose at work? What is your purpose at work? To help the women achieve recovery, Cindy says. To help my job seekers to succeed. How about that? Provide connection. Yeah, they say, Jessica, the opposite of addiction is not recovery, it's connection. To be the best case manager I can be. How about that, Kristen? Me too. I want to be the best I can be. To meet people where they're at. Oh, Melissa, you can achieve that 100% of the time. To help others understand their mental health doesn't have. To make life easier for everyone and spread joy. Brooke says, to give clients hope. Down with dope, up with hope. To be an effective provider. And Terry says, to show others that recovery is possible. Elizabeth O'Brien being a walking example that this is possible. To make people's lives sustainable. These are really good to ensure client needs are being met. And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. Thank you so much. All right, my friends. The characteristics of a personal mission statement. They should be short and easy to memorize. They say that a good mission statement should be short enough to fit on the back of a business card so that you really know what your mission is. It should involve a number of significant areas you realize. So, for example, a moment ago, I had you journal on your mission in your community, your mission at home, and your mission at work. And it should excite you. I've written 2 in my life. Let me share with you the first one, to be a role model, someone said. This was the first mission statement I ever wrote. To help individuals and organizations, someone said to bridge the gap. To help individuals and organizations reach their potential through speaking, training, and consulting. To help individuals and organizations reach their potential through speaking, training, and consulting. Blah, blah, blah. So boring. That could be the mission statement of any consultant in the world. So generic. But 20 years ago, I rewrote it. Someone said, don't just use your head. Use your heart too. So this is my mission for the last 20 years. To leave every room I enter better than how I found it. To leave every room I enter better than how I found it. That means a couple of things. I have to clean up after myself. Throw paper away when I'm doing a training. It means if you invite me to your agency and people are feeling down and pessimistic, I have to leave that room better. I have to be optimistic and hopeful. And I have to remember that home is a room too. And I'm not successful if I do a training with you and you say I'm a great guy and I go home and kick the cat. Home is a room too. And I also have to leave home better than how I found it. A good mission statement is short and easy to memorize. Should involve more than one significant area in your life, and it should excite you. Use your head and your heart. And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. Here's your task. You got 2 minutes to do this. To finish your STEM, this STEM. My life mission is, what is your purpose? What's your mission? Would you take a moment and put that in writing, and then I'll make it make sense. Yeah, Melissa, that's short and sweet. And you know, if everybody had that mission statement to love and be loved, right? And you put it in the right order because the world may not give to us, but we can still give to empower others. I read. Yeah, these are short and sweet, easy to memorize. What's your overall mission? To brighten the lives of others. Yeah, you'd have to have an internal spirituality. You know, I talked about like working on our spirits to make a positive impact, Latoya says, right? To pick people up when they fall. How about that? To pick people up when they fall. Donna Ross said, if you see a man on the street with no shoes on his feet, right? Reach out and touch to transform lives, Latoya says. Create generational wealth. That's a goal for Jay-Z too, to inspire courage and commitment. Pamela says. To support and spread kindness. Yeah, you can do that every day. So, give your colleagues a round of applause because here's what they say. The 2 most important days of a person's life is the day they were born. And the second is the day they find out why they were born. And our mission is why we were on Earth. And Amy, we should go to the next slide. I always wonder, we're talking about being our best. My mentor is at his best. He's 5 times more productive than just about everybody else I know. He accomplishes more. He's at his best. So I wondered, why is he so successful? And I visited his home office and it all made sense to me. In his home office, there's his desk. And on his desk is his computer and his telephone. And all the requests come into him either through email or through the telephone. And above his computer and his telephone are 3 things. His personal mission statement he has above his computer. He has above his computer a hand holding a puppet string. And then a sign that reads, life is not an emergency. So I said, explain it. He said, when people call me with requests, I always look at my mission statement. And if it's not lined up with my personal mission statement, I ask them to get somebody else to do that. Then I glance over at that hand holding a puppet string. When people want to tug at my heart with requests, I remind myself I'm not a puppet. You can't dangle me in 1,000,001 different directions. I'm not a puppet. I said, and what about the sign that reads, life is not an emergency? Recovery coaches and case managers, you will appreciate this. Because you help clients, people you serve, with crises and emergencies all the time. My mentor said he put that sign there to remind himself that even if he helps others with crises and emergencies, that he refuses to live his life in a state of emergency. His life is not an emergency. And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. Thank you. So are you all sitting down? Because I'm going to make something bold, a bold statement here. We always talk about balance, right? And I've read the biographies of some of the most successful people of all time. None of them had balance, but they tried. Albert Einstein, he was so busy trying to show America how to build the atom bomb so Hitler wouldn't take over the world. He didn't have balance. He was so busy hanging out with other physicists, he didn't have balance. His wife couldn't stand him. His kids had all kinds of problems because dad was gone all the time. Einstein was gone all the time. One of his sons was in therapy with Sigmund Freud. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't have balance. He was gone all the time. Malcolm X didn't have balance. He was gone all the time. Mother Teresa didn't have balance. But I read a book that put it all in perspective for me. Would you write down on a piece of paper your 5 most important relationships? This is the last thing I'll ask you to write down. Your 5 most important relationships. For example, I'm a brother and a son and a father. What are your 5 most important relationships? So here's what I learned in this book called The One Thing. Or your 5 most important roles, I'm sorry. 5 most important roles. So I got from this book called The One Thing. Amy, we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. It's to jot down your 5 most important roles. Again, I'm a father and a son, right? And then ask yourself every day, what is the one thing I can do in each of these important areas of my life to have the greatest impact? One thing in each area. Is it to drive your child to school? To tell your spouse you love them every day? One thing in each of these areas. And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. And one more slide, I think. So we're talking about, to summarize this, let your mission dictate your time in order to be your best. And Amy, we'll go to the next slide. Protect your evenings and weekends. Treat them as if they were sacred. Again, some of you have an invisible sign in the middle of your forehead. Call me anytime, I'll help you. But let me put it into perspective. There are 52 weekends in the year. Now, I've looked at the data on how long most African American men live in Chicago. If I live that long, I have about 450 weekends to go in my life. If you're white and female and you expect to live to be 80 and you're 40 years old, you only have 2,000 weekends to go. If you are, say, 71 and you expect to live until 80, right? You got 9 summers left. Summers got to count. COVID took one. My summers got to count, right? These are some of the only times we can replenish ourselves, our weekends and evenings. And here's a question for you to think about. And I think about it every day because people tug at my heart with requests all the time. If I'm not careful, I can become a human doing rather than a human being. What do you need to get really good at saying no to in order to be your best because you're able to protect your time? Johnny says his grandkids. We shall go to the next slide. Okay, being the world's best teammate. All right, let's chat. Who's the best basketball player ever? The best ever? Let's put that in chat. Is it Giannis? Is it Larry Bird? Is it Jordan? Jamie says MJ. MJ. Somebody said Kobe. Somebody 31 years old said Kobe. Someone 45 said Jordan. Melissa says Jordan. Jessica says Kareem, the king of the court. I can't debate any of it, but let me tell you this. Bill Russell is the greatest teammate of all time. Giannis will get there. Jordan has 6 rings. Kobe had 5. Bill Russell, 11 rings in 13 years. 11 and 13 years. And he said his job every game was to pick a different teammate. He said, I'm going to make you look good today. You're a great teammate when you let your teammates know you appreciate them. Incredible story that I read in a book called Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul. And it tells the story of this teacher who had a special group of students. She wanted these students to know how special they were. So she lined them up in a straight row, gave each student a blue ribbon that said, you make a difference. Realizing that feedback is nothing unless it's specific, she told each of them how they made a difference. And she gave them some extra ribbons so they can share with people who made a difference in their life that they made a difference. And one of her students gave a ribbon, you make a difference, to his boss. He said, sir, when you gave me that part-time job, you really taught me the value of hard work. You helped me save enough money to buy a bicycle. Here's a ribbon, you make a difference. Gave him some extras. His boss decided he would give a ribbon, you make a difference, to the CEO of the company. And says, sir, you're a creative genius. That's why we're one of the top companies in America. Here's a ribbon, you make a difference. He gave him some extras. The CEO decided he would give a ribbon, you make a difference, to his 9-year-old son. And that evening he walked in his son's room and said, son, I know I'm always yelling at you. Do your homework. Pick up that sock. Go to bed, eat those vegetables. I know I'm always yelling at you. But I wanted you to know, son, the best day of my life was the day you were born. Here's a ribbon, you make a difference. And tears welled up in the son's eyes and he held his hands up, right? And he covered his tears. He said, thanks, Dad. He said, now I don't have to kill myself. He says, I was thinking of committing suicide tomorrow because I thought you didn't love me. And now I don't have to do so. When you let a coworker know you appreciate them, you never know what they might have been experiencing before that. Incredible story about this woman who worked at Woolworths for 50 years. Who's familiar with Woolworths? She was never late, hardly ever called in sick. Reporters asked her, how are you able to give 50 years of your life to Woolworths? Never late, hardly ever called in sick. She said one word, that word was baseball glove. She started her job during the Great Depression. And the first day she showed up to work, her son called. He said, Mom, now that you have that new job, will you finally get me that baseball glove you promised? Said, not now, son, I'm kind of behind in the payment of bills. I promise you. I'll get you the baseball glove as soon as I possibly can. Her supervisor overheard the conversation. Walked in the next day and said, listen, I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, and I have a son too. One of the things I understand about kids is your kids don't always understand when you say you can't buy something right now. So I brought you this baseball glove. I'd like to ask you to give it to your son, and I hope he appreciates it. And she said that one act of kindness after another, led to her feeling a sense of appreciation. And she was able to give 50 years of her life to Woolworths. I looked at the research on what motivates us to do our best work. Believe it or not, pay ranks number 3 on the list. Number 1 is feeling appreciated by our coworkers and our supervisor and the agency's director. The best coworkers lend a helping hand. They don't have to be told. They just lend a helping hand. They show up. You see it happen 20 years ago. My first son died. And because I'm a speaker on the road, I had no coworkers. My wife called every agency where I used to work, and 250 of my former coworkers showed up. And those of you who work in the addictions field, you know we are a one-hugging field, right? I hugged 250 certified alcohol and drug abuse counselors at my son's funeral. You ever hug 250 people? It nearly killed me, but it breathed life into me. I felt so loved by my former coworkers. I did the unthinkable. We had another child. It was that love, right? They show up to funerals and anniversaries and weddings They show up. The best coworkers, the best teammates stay out of mess, like gossip, organizational dysfunction. I want to share with you a technique that's called reverse gossip. It's called reverse gossip. The next time one of your coworkers comes up to you and tells you something bad about another coworker, reverse that and tell them good about something about that coworker. That's called reverse gossip. The best teammates use those 4 magical words. Let's go to lunch. Let's go to lunch. Those are the magical words. And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. You see, before we look at this particular slide, I promised you I would talk with you about having a good friend at work, right? How important that is. Okay. So we're going to move right now from talking about individual teammate and being your best to team health. How many of you work in an agency that does regular team building retreats to bring the team together? I have found that by doing an annual retreat where the whole team comes together and makes plans how they're going to work together. And by the way, let me tell you how we set these up. I facilitate lots of team building retreats. We get away from the agency, right? I usually like to invite a stand-up comic, a local comic, right? Maybe a singer from Milwaukee, right? Then we do these retreats. The whole team comes together. And I found that these 6 questions can guide an all-day team building session. What are we doing well as a team that needs to continue? Always starting with the positive. What stops us from being as effective as we can be as a team? What changes or additions would improve our effectiveness as a team? What do you want teammates to know about what it's like to walk in your shoes? You see, a number of you work in different departments, and what I've learned working at big agencies is every department feels like they're doing all the work until they come to a team building retreat and listen to what other people are doing and the stress on other departments. Number 5 is really important. Somebody put Steve Kerr's name in chat as the best basketball player. No, he wasn't the best basketball player, great coach. But what great coaches do, they always set team goals. What are our goals for the next 6 months to improve our team effectiveness? Who will do what and when, and how will we measure progress? Teams that set goals, right, achieve more. And then the 6th one is just simply an individual commitment at the end of a team building session. I recommend that you do these once or twice a year. What are we each prepared to do as individuals to help this team to grow? And Amy, we shall go to the next slide. Is our organization a great place to work? After asking 100 million questions to employees in diverse fields, a Gallup poll found that the 12 questions below, now that's a lot of questions, like 100 million questions. A Gallup poll found that the 12 questions below do the best job of measuring the core elements needed to attract and to keep the most talented employees. These findings are based with 25 years of research with 1 million employees. Here are the questions. Amy, we shall go to the next slide. Do I know what's expected to me at work? That's an orientation question. The second question, because in order to have high morale, we want to keep staff around. Do I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right? Receptionists need a really good phone line, right? And a really good computer. Case managers need a lot of training. That's the equipment they need. Recovery coaches need a lot of training. That's the equipment they need, right? At work, do I have the opportunity to do best every day what I really enjoy doing? If you are a supervisor and a director with me today, once a year, you should go back and look at the resume of everybody you hired to remember what they like to do. I'll give you an example. Over the years, I've worked with lots of art therapists. They love art, but they're so busy doing case management, they never get a chance to do art. It's my job to make sure they have an art therapy group every week too. Amy, we should go to the next slide. In the past 7 days, have I received recognition or praise for doing good work? Does my supervisor or someone at work care about me as a person? Here's the story. Forever ago, May 29, 1986, I was giving my first speech ever. And my supervisor said, I want to go with you to give that speech. I want to give you some constructive criticism. My friends, I've always had a problem with that term, constructive criticism, because construct means to build up. Criticize means to tear down. How are you going to build me up and tear me down at the same time? That's like taking a bath in dirt and drying off with water. It's like riding a horse backwards. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And what doesn't help is the agency where I was to give this speech. It was a Monday morning, and the workers showed up looking hungover and unhappy. Do you believe Monday morning blues is real? They didn't look happy. I'm thinking, what a terrible audience they're going to be when my supervisor is there to give me some constructive criticism. The only person that looked happy was the janitor. He was dusting the place, moving to the beat of a different drummer. He was singing an old Jeffrey Osborne song. You all know Jeffrey Osborne? He was singing the Jeffrey Osborne song. Here are the lyrics. Can you woo, woo, woo? Who's ever heard that song? Can you woo, woo, woo? So I'm singing this song in my head. I'm feeling all happy and upbeat. I'm ready to give the speech. 5 minutes into the conversation, right after I sung the song, Can You Woo, 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 there's a knock on the door. And that's when I get the phone call. My daddy died smoking crack cocaine while I was giving my first speech ever. And I had 3 things operating against me when I got the news of my father. That was the worst news of my life at that point in my life. 1, I was raised a traditional male. And I was taught that men didn't cry. And 2, I was taught to intellectualize my pain. But rather than crying, I'm thinking, I'm a social worker. I got to see my siblings so I can refer them for grief counseling. They need to see a therapist for grief. My dad just died. My supervisor said, let's go. We got in the cab. And I looked over at my supervisor. And she was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. She was crying. I knew she cared. And every week that whole year, she would ask me once a week, are you okay? I know she cared. You know, someone said to me that no one cares how much you know unless they know how much you care. She was a heart leader, right? By the way, she attended my father's funeral in 1986. She was my first supervisor ever. And she attended my son's funeral in 2001. She's the only non-relative, my first supervisor, who attended both of those funerals. I told her I'd walk through a fire for her. Does your supervisor or someone at work care about you as a person? Is there someone at work that encourages your development? And Amy, we'll go to the next slide. Work through my opinions seem to count. Leaders, let me let you in on another secret. Research says that what motivates people to do their best work, feeling appreciated is number 1. Number 3 is the paycheck. Number 2, my opinions count. The smartest thing we can do is ask the secretary for their opinion, the receptionist for their opinion, the case manager for their opinion. When my opinion counts, I'm committed to staying there. Does the mission purpose of my job make me feel my job is important? You know, about a month ago, I did a presentation at an agency, and the 2 people I praised the most was the receptionist. And I said to the receptionist, motivational interviewing doesn't begin with the therapist. It begins when people see your face and you give them that sincere smile. And I praise the maintenance person that's mopped the place and cleaned the place every day so that clients can walk into a clean environment and feel a sense of what Martin Luther King called a sense of somebodyness, right? Does my mission, regardless of my title, make me feel my work is important? Are my coworkers committed to doing quality work? And Amy, we should go to the next slide. Do I have a best friend at work? Incredible story about this American soldier who was stationed in Afghanistan. She flew home to New Jersey to get married. And then she flew back to Afghanistan and lost her hand in battle. Her best friends at work in the military went back on that battlefield and found her hand so they can give her back that wedding band that was lodged on her finger. Research says when you have a best friend at work, one of your coworkers, it leads to greater job satisfaction, right? More happiness at work, right? Less organizational turnover. Leadership, we gotta be promoting friendship at work. In the last 6 months, has someone talked to me about my progress? In the last year, have I had the opportunity to grow and to learn at work? So here's what I want to say to you. Amy, would you go back to question number 1? You maybe 3 slides back, right there. Here's what I want to share with you. The research says these questions are in the right order. What I encourage you to do, if you wanted to be a stronger organization with good morale and a good place to work, take these 12 questions as a team. See where we are, where we're strong out of the 12, and where we need to make improvements, and work on the ones where we need to make improvement, right? And the organization will be known as a great place to work. These are in the right order. 1 and 2 are the most important. 1 involves a thorough orientation. And 2, I need to be well trained to do my job. It gets interesting. Years ago, I was working in a program that hired a woman that was a nurse. She switched from nursing to behavioral health. And her job was to manage a federal contract. If you ever work with a federal grant, I believe sometimes the feds make that stuff so complicated that you have to call them to figure out how to do it. It's a way of keeping them employed. This is some complicated stuff, federal grants. She was confused all the time. And on top of it, the feds had 3 agencies in the community working together on this grant. They didn't like each other. They were fighting all the time. And she'd go to her supervisor and said, I need some help. I need supervision. I need some support. Her supervisor would say, I don't believe in micromanagement. Truth of the matter, her supervisor didn't believe in supervision because she never met with her. Eventually, the woman left the agency. And years later, she left the agency. And I ran into her. She was walking down the street with a little boy. And she said, this is my son. And she pulled me aside and said, I got no supervision when I was there. And I was overwhelmed. And I miscarried twice because of the stress. I had to leave there in order to have a child. The first 6 questions, according to the research, are the most connected to retention of quality staff. If your staff can answer yes to these 6 questions, do I know what's expected of me at work? Do I have the materials to do my work right? Do I have the chance to do what I do best every day? And Amy will go to the next slide. In the last 7 days, is somebody giving me praise for the work that I do? Does my supervisor care about me? Is there someone who encourages me? If case managers, therapists, counselors can answer yes to that, chances are they'll stay around a while and clients will make more progress. And Amy, we'll go 2 slides over. 1 more. 1 more. I just went over that one. Okay. So we've been together now. And Amy, how long have you been having these change agent meetings?
How long have I been doing them?
Yeah,
I know they started, I think, in 2010, and I was hired in 2011.
So I've probably been with you the whole time.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, so Amy, they were asking to post those questions, and I encourage you to give them the PowerPoint so they can work with those questions. Okay, so Amy, in the future, you invite me again. I want to see everybody face to face again. I Are you also at the cultural center in Milwaukee? The
So,
Italian-
uh, so we are shifting a little bit and doing probably the Zufari or the PEC Center just because it's a county entity and it's a little bit easier for us to rent that facility. But we do half of the year in person. And so,
I want to see everybody again.
yeah,
So if you
yes,
come again.
I was
So,
thinking the same thing, Mark.
All right, so here's what we want you to do. I've learned over the years, not so much what I teach, but more about the action you take. So would you respond to this question? What is the one action you're going to take when this webinar is over as a result of the time that we spent together today? What will you do? Will you let this time roll up like a raisin in the sun? Will you let the information stay on the shelf? And I'll be there, Johnny. What's your action? Yeah, me too, Abigail. I want to be more present. Yeah, Philip, you'll get the slides, I believe. Yeah, reverse gossip. Boy, you should see how good Amy does group therapy. My goodness. Reverse gossip. Yeah. Yeah, Pamela, every time we encourage another person, we somehow feel inspired ourselves because our unconscious mind doesn't know if we're talking about themselves or us, so we feel good lifting up other people, preventing burnout. Embrace my coworkers with respect and dignity they deserve. Yes. Yeah, Marion, we have those weekends in order to replenish ourselves. My brother returned from the Persian Gulf War. His first request was that I take him to McDonald's. Apparently, in the Middle East, they don't have McDonald's. So I went to get some McDonald's, and he wanted to, he was in the Navy, he wanted to eat the French fries in front of Lake Michigan. You ever notice how hard McDonald's French fries get once they hit the air? He started throwing those French fries out to the seagulls. And they're better athletes. Seagulls are better athletes than Giannis and Michael Jordan. They were catching these French fries. I said, wait a minute, you're increasing their cholesterol levels. Stop throwing those seagulls French fries. My brother just come from the Navy. He asked me a question that I didn't know the answer to, but he knew the answer to the question. He says, Mark, when you're looking at a body of water, at what point, how far out does the sky and the water meet? And I didn't know. He said, when you're traveling on a ship, the sky and the water will meet 17 miles out. So no matter how far you travel, it's going to look like you're making no progress because the sky and the water are not going to meet for 17 miles. He said, the only way you know that you're making progress is to look back on the shore in which you came. So here's my encouragement to you. Be about the business of growing every year and making progress. Like the Aborigines, once you achieve that goal, right? Call the tribe and say, it's time for my party now. Look back on where you came from. And that's how you know. And if you ever experience any pessimism in terms of like work with clients, that they're not making progress fast enough, just look back on where they came. And know that in the long run, that 75% will eventually achieve some recovery. Our job is to do really great work in the meantime. So thank you so very much for allowing me to spend this time with you. And Amy, thank you for inviting me, and for the change agent community for offering these all these years. No one does this the way you all do this.
Thank you so much for coming again this year, Mark. Once again, a stellar presentation. Is it okay if I mention just a couple of things right now?
We're ready.
Okay. Two things, actually. Someone did reach out to me and state that there was only 2 questions on the registration when you were entering in. If that was the case, please go back into the link and make sure that you answer all 7 questions, or it might be 8 questions. It should be your name, your last name, email, agency, all of those things, because that is how you'll get Mark's slides. So make sure that you have answered all of those questions. Secondly, I'm just about ready to drop the link in the chat for your certificate of attendance. If you haven't ever done one of those before, the way that works is you go into the link, You answer the questions. It's an evaluation about the presentation today, and then it will prompt you with an arrow to another link, and that is your certificate of attendance. And it is up to you what you'd like to do with it. You can save it, you can print it and write your name on it. It's completely up to you. So I just wanted to say those two things before we go into maybe a question time for Mark. Is that okay with you, Mark?
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and come out of your slides then. And stop sharing so we can see you. And I can see all of you now too, finally. So this is a good time to ask Mark any questions or say any comments that you'd like to say. And I'll put that link in the chat right now. See if I can get back in there. It just got put in right now. And remember, the way that it works is you go into it, you answer the few questions about today's presentation. And then after that, then it will be the certificate of attendance.
I believe in the PowerPoint on the last slide is a way of reaching me if anybody wants to reach out to me. I shall be your partner in figuring out how to do this work around co-occurring disorders more effectively.
If you have somebody in here. So Mark, can you see everyone's responses in the chat?
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
They're saying very, very nice things.
Yeah. It was a wonderful presentation today. Thank you so much. And right on with that topic, Mark. You did great.
Thank you. So Amy, then I'll let the group go and until we see each other again.
Yes, we'll see you again next year. Thank you. And if anybody has anything that they would like to connect with Mark about, just let me know. You can email me, is fine. Also, if you have your email within that link for registration, you'll get those PowerPoints.
Trying to link.
You're welcome. I'm staying on just in case anybody struggles with that certificate of attendance.
What certificate of attendance?
Should be in the chat. You go into the link. I'm going to put it in there again for you right now. Answer a few questions about the presentation today, and then it should prompt you into another link, and that will be your certificate of attendance. If the certificate of attendance didn't come up for whatever reason, just remember that I'm sending out the PowerPoints, and so with the PowerPoints will come the certificate of attendance too. So don't panic. Just remember, hopefully that you're on the registration. Sometimes with the certificate of attendance, sometimes they'll come up and sometimes they won't. It just depends on your computer. I can tell you on mine, it comes right up. I just tested it just right now. But let's go back and just double check here. Sometimes people have no issues with it, and sometimes it's a bit of a struggle. I will say this though, to look to your either your one of the corners on your screen. Sometimes when it downloads, for whatever reason, it goes up into that little corner for some reason.
Yeah, you have to make sure you download it, which some people might have a problem with.
Yep. And so, but if you, like I said, if your email is on the, if your email is on the registration, then you'll have no problems. I'll just send a hard copy or an actual download of the certificate. Hi, Mary. Philip, if you are not sure if you're registered, just go right back into the link that you entered to get into the meeting and fill out that information again. Just make sure you fill out all 7 questions.
Even if you don't know the answer, just make up something.
Just make sure you have your email. That's the biggest thing. Just make sure it's a valid email. Okay, if you are all set with that, then I am going to say my goodbyes and I'll go ahead and begin the process of sending out Mark's link. If for whatever reason you don't get it, just email me. It's as easy as that, right, Pam? You just email me and I send it over to you.
Yep, email Amy and yeah, she'll send it. And
I'll
Amy,
send it.
we don't have a change agent meeting in March, is that correct?
We do not have a change agent meeting in March.
Okay, and then in April, are we meeting in person?
No, April is, I think, our last virtual. It's our last
Okay.
virtual, and then we go into a resilience training at Zufari by Kelly Bubbles. And then I don't have anything for June yet. Nobody's filled that space, but I do believe we have July and August always is orientation.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
September is a special date, which I talked to you briefly about today. It won't come on the 4th Wednesday. It will come on September 10th. And so that's the special announcement that's coming up. October is our big event, which is the Storyboard Marketplace.
Our storyboard.
Yep. And so we're looking at our quality improvement projects throughout our community, and then we take a break until we come back and see each other again the next year.
Yeah, so our storyboard is kind of the new mingle. So
Kinda.
yeah, people need to really gear up for that.
Yeah. Yep. So
Good job, Amy.
So, okay, it's good to see you. I'm gonna hop off and I am going to see if I can get the slides over to everybody.
Okay, thank you.
See you
Good to see
soon.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.